Hi, my name is Colleen Myers. I'm a recovering judgmental church lady, and I'm glad you've joined me for this episode of the Smack Dab podcast, living smack dab in the center of God's will.
Hey, you guys, today I want to open in prayer because I'm going to share a story, and I just feel like I should pray over every single person that's listening to this story that God will use it to encourage you. So, Lord Jesus, as I share this amazing thing that you did, you can't even make this stuff up. You did it. And I just ask that you would use this God story to minister to others, to give encouragement to others. We love you, Jesus. Amen. Well, I want to tell you what happened. It's been about a year now, a little less than a year ago. I got to back up and give some background. There's a church in Texas that has supported the rave outreach ministry we do. You can go to Engage to Go Ministries and find out more about what we do, but we minister at massive rave parties in 7 states across the country. We take older moms and dads with us to share God's love with the kids, help ravers who we find in trouble, and actually rescue some that we find in danger. And we've been doing this for about 17 years now. And we have seen some incredible things like that you can't even believe. Like I said when I was praying, you can't even make this stuff up because God orchestrates the most amazing things because we're walking smack dab in the center of his will, right? When we're fulfilling the Great Commission. And so we get to see God work in real time. And I'm going to share one of those times with you. So here's the backup information. There's this church in Texas that has been in the past just faithful to support the ministry. And they had given, gifts every month to us to keep us out there, getting out there to these rave outreaches that we do. And every time we were in town, we live in California, but every time we were in town, in this town in Texas, they would have us come and share at their church and just give them updates. And they always made the bracelets that we used to hand out at raves. So if you go on Engage to Go Ministries, you'll see about the bracelets, what we do and how we use them. And the bracelets are rave-style bracelets that ravers collect and trade as a sign of PLUR to each other. And PLUR is their motto. It's the ravers' motto for peace, love, unity, and respect. And so we have alphabet beads on these rave-style bracelets that we give out at raves. And our website, spelled out in these alphabet beads, is PLURway.com. And when they go to PLURway.com, they hear the way to finding true PLUR through a relationship with Jesus versus where they're looking for it in all the wrong places, right? The only way to find true peace, true love, true unity, and true respect is in the family of God and in a relationship with him. And so anyway, this church had spent a lot of time making the bracelets for us that we give out at raves. And we give out about 100,000 of these bracelets every year. And so God told us early on not to have them pre-made in China, but we just order the beads and get them out to believers who are willing to string these beads painstakingly on this elastic cord and knot it all up together. And they have been asked to pray over each bracelet that they make and the person that bracelet will be given to someday. And so we have had hundreds of people across the country making these bracelets for us and praying over the kids who will receive them at the rave parties we go to. And this church was part of that. They would have bracelet making parties. And so it was awesome for us to be able to come and share the stories and thank them for the work they had done making these bracelets, because there was so much fruit that came from that church making those bracelets. And so they wanted us to come share every time. Well, one of the last times I shared there, um, I I was telling a story and looking out over the crowd that was there, and there was this man sitting there, and his name is I found out later was Lloyd. And it was almost like this light was shining on Lloyd. Like I just knew, I think God's gonna call that guy to be a rave dad. There was just something about him. And so when he came up to me afterwards and came up to my husband and said, I may be interested in being on your team and going to raves as a rave dad. Oh, I just looked at him and I said, I know you're interested in that because God told me. I could see He was pointing you out to me. And I don't even know you, but I just believe that God has called you tonight. And sure enough, God did call Lloyd. And Lloyd's wife was totally behind him and supportive and wanted him to go out and bless these kids in this way with our team. And so when we would go to Texas, Lloyd would go with us on our team. And pretty soon we had an outreach that came up, where we had to ask Lloyd, would you be willing to be the only dad on the team for this outreach tonight? Because our other dad isn't able to make it. And he took a deep breath and he said, yeah, I can do that. And we had a bunch of moms, but we only had one dad. And the dads are so supportive. They do a lot of behind the scenes work at outreaches. The moms are usually the ones out with the kids, but they are in our ministry RV that we use sort of like a headquarters outside the raves, and they're making us food and making us coffee all night and praying over us when we come in crying because we just experienced something super hard. And then when we do have a kid that we bring back to our RV to charge their phone or give them a bottle of water or something, if we feel that it would bless them to talk to a dad and really to hear words of life and hope from a dad, we'll ask the dad to come out and sit and share with the kid. Well, anyway, so Lloyd was on this outreach, and he was our only dad, and he knocked it out of the park. He just rocked it. He did a great job. Fast forward, this church that supported us, they were meeting in a sort of a industrial complex, and their church just grew and grew and grew over the years. And whenever we would be in town and we would go and speak there, I couldn't believe, how many more people were there, more and more and more. And so sure enough, they outgrew their building. Well, they ended up buying a building from a local family that owned a huge building in town and was willing to sell it to the church. Now, this family had no faith in their life. And so the pastor, um, he thought it would be really important to invite this family to come to the very first church service in the new building. And he planned to honor this family. And he was also going to preach a sermon that shared the gospel. And he was excited for this family to come because, like I said, they had shared with him that they weren't religious in any way. That's how a lot of people say it, but they were saying that they didn't have faith and they didn't know Jesus. And so, unfortunately, a few nights before the big celebration, first service in this big building, a representative on behalf of the family called the pastor and said, I'm so sorry, the family will not be in attendance. Their 20-year-old son was killed in a car accident. And the pastor was just devastated to hear this news. And then on top of that, they said, because we don't have any, religion in our life, would you please do the boys' service? And the pastor agreed. And with a broken heart, he went a couple days later to perform the funeral for this young man. And he said, the pastor told us later that he was just so devastated. As he looked out over the crowd, he could tell they were grieving with no hope. It wasn't a celebration of life. And this would be hard for even if you are walking with Jesus, fully walking with Jesus, to lose a 20-something-year-old kid. That's tough. But for people who have no hope and don't know where he is, I mean, that would just be so hard. And so he completed the service with a heavy heart, but he did share the gospel. And then everybody went back to the family home and for the reception afterwards. And this pastor was walking through, he shared with us later, he's walking through the home. And the boy's sister had made like a sort of a memory table. And there were photos of all different stages of life of this young man, when he was a baby, when he was in, elementary school, when he graduated high school. And then there was a shadow box. And the pastor shared that he had been walking through this home just praying, God, would you show me? I'm just so heartbroken. And I don't know if this young man knew you. If he did know you, will you please give me a sign? Will you show me something in this house? Because his whole family has no faith. And so I'm just assuming that he didn't either. But as I'm walking through, could you please show me? So he came upon this shadow box that the young man's sister had put together. And in this shadow box were all of the young man's most prized possessions. So there was the watch that his grandfather had given him, and there was the lei that he had worn at his high school graduation. And sitting there in that box was one of those PLURway.com bracelets that our team gives out at raves. And the pastor just gasped. And he went to find the sister. And he said, I just have to know. I know about those bracelets. I know about the people that go to raves to give those bracelets out. How did your brother have one? We make these at our church. Like, how did your brother have this, and why is it one of his most prized possessions? There's only like 10 or 11 things in this shadow box. And she said, oh, it's the weirdest thing, I have to tell you. She said, my brother went to a rave at the end of last year. And he was supposed to go with friends, and they canceled out on him at the last minute. And so he went by himself, and he was totally bummed when he left. And then he shared with me, when he got home, he was like a different person. He was just bubbly and happy. And so I asked him, what happened to you? You left here last night, so upset. You were going alone. You were depressed. And so she said, my brother shared with me that when he got out of the rave, he needed to charge his phone. And he saw all these moms handing out these bracelets and hugging kids and talking to kids. And they were next to an RV. And he explained to me that there was a big sign on the side of the RV, and it said, need water, need to charge your phone, need prayer, come see us here. And so he needed to charge his phone. So he went over, and there was this man sitting there next to the RV where they were charging people's phones. And he went up to this man and said, my phone is dead. I'd like to charge it before I start the long drive home. And the man said, sure, pull up a chair and sit there and charge the RV. And this man gave him this bracelet and shared the meaning of the bracelet. And my brother said it changed his life. And so it's one of his most prized possessions. And so the pastor is listening to this story and about jumping out of his skin. And he said, just a minute, I think I might know that man that talked to your brother that night. Because you see, Lloyd was the only person in that whole congregation that had heard us speaking for all those years. He's the only one that had come forward and said, yes, I want to help you. I want to be on your team. They had helped us a lot by praying for us, by supporting us financially, and by making the bracelets. But Lloyd was special, and I knew it. And he was the one that was saying that night, here I am, send me. And do you know that pastor got on the phone with Lloyd right then and there at that funeral reception and said, Lloyd, do you remember this kid? And he described the kid, and he gave him his name. And he said he came and charged a phone, needed to charge a phone. And Lloyd said, yeah, I remember that kid. I shared the gospel with him that night. And the pastor said, Lloyd, that's the kid that was killed in the car accident a few days ago. That's the kid I went to do his funeral service. And he explained that that bracelet that Lloyd had given him was in the shadow box with his 10 most prized possessions. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And what happened next is the best part of all, because the pastor hung up the phone with Lloyd and he turned to the sister and he said, I found the man that talked to your brother that night. And she said, really? The man that said stuff that changed his whole attitude, that turned him around? Yes. She said, would you ask him to come? Our family's having a meeting tomorrow. Will you ask him to come to our family meeting and share with my family what he shared with my brother? And so Lloyd did. He went the next day and he shared the gospel with his family. And he told them who Jesus is. And he told them how Jesus had changed that young man's life and how he was certain that that young man was in heaven with Jesus. And God arranged all this. God knew something tragic was going to happen. But God wanted to be sure that that young man knew and had a chance to receive him as his Lord and Savior before he died. And I believe we'll see that young man in heaven someday. And I also think that we'll see his whole family in heaven someday. I have great hope of that because God did this miracle and there's no way he's finished with this story yet. And so I just wanted to tell this long story. This is longer than most of the podcasts I do, but I wanted to share this with you as an encouragement. And I hope it encouraged you to be there for that kid, to notice, be a noticer, and be willing to share the gospel because you don't know what tomorrow will hold for these people that God puts in your path. Share Jesus with someone today. It could mean the difference between life and death for them. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Smack Dab podcast. Be sure to subscribe and check out our latest episodes.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Smack Dab podcast. If this has been a blessing to you, please consider helping us continue by making a donation to our sponsor at engagetogoministries.com.